Welcome to the SRS Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron J. Babyar, and I'm the Training Director of Support Raising Solutions. Whether you're a new ministry worker or a veteran looking to increase your competence and confidence, Support Raising Solutions seeks to bless you in your quest to be a spiritually healthy, vision-driven, fully funded Great Commission worker. My guest today is Jenn Fortner. Jenn has been a guest on the podcast before, and actually I think I referred to her and her website a few podcasts ago, and she's just become a trusted friend and co-worker, thinker, just a bright lady that thinks about MPD very well. And also Jenn coaches support raising. I know she does it with Eurasia World Mission, and she even does some other inside of the different organization. But Jenn, first of all, before I get any further into all that, welcome to the podcast, my friend. I'm glad you could be with us today.
Hey, thanks, Aaron. Glad to be here.
So for the listeners, share with us briefly, where are you at, and how's the virus affected you the last few weeks? And I know there's a longer version to the story, and you might not want to get into all of that.
Right.
But share what you can over a minute or two if you feel the freedom to do so.
Yeah, sure. So I work for Assemblies of God World Missions in Springfield, Missouri, and I have this comes into play. I've got two toddlers. I've got a 3-year-old and a 2-year-old. I typically work out of an office where I coach and train around 70 missionaries going overseas, raising their funds for the first time to get overseas and into their assignments. And then I also run trainings that already met online. So that's helpful. But long and short of it is, we're in shelter in place here in Springfield and working at home and trying to take care of my littles while still working and keeping up with emails and trainings and phone calls and all of that. So it's definitely been a busy, different season. Kind of trying to find my strategy and groove and get some grounding in the midst of this, and just like everyone else is. So that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah. And of course, having a 1 and a 3-year-old, aren't you thankful that they just go to sleep every night right at 8 o'clock?
Yeah. You know what? I am fortunate in the fact that Sloan and Merrick are both wonderful sleepers. They are very active during the day. We don't have to do the homeschooling thing, which I hear is a total, if you've got a kindergartner or anything, my heart goes out to you because that is challenging, especially if you're trying to work at the same time. So we're fortunate in the sense that, we don't have that responsibility and duty on top of everything. But, Merrick doesn't do so well when mommy's trying to type on the computer and Daniel Tiger just ran out. So we got to figure those little challenges out pretty regularly.
I have different problems with mine. My two youngest are 16 and 17, and they're sophomore and junior in high school. And I cannot help them with their science or math. Like it's impossible.
Yeah.
So it's like I help by being a cheerleader that says, sit down, please, and do your homework. But that's pretty different than knowing how to help. But anyway.
Yeah.
Well, this virus is obviously just a horrible thing, and it's affecting so many different things. Of course, people's health, but then the economy, and of course, our very own homes, Jenn. And one of the areas that people are really wondering about, and why we've had multiple requests even to do a series on this topic in this unique time, is what do people do? What do they say if they're needing to raise support? They're starting with a phone call, probably. Are they being insensitive? Should they not make that phone call? And if they do make that phone call, which the previous episode I did with Scott Morton, he encouraged people to make that call, go ahead and move forward. But if somebody does get that far and they go, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to be brave, and I'm going to call someone. Okay, now what? Now what? And so I really appreciate that. I'm sure a lot of our listeners have a lot of sensitivity to, I don't want to say the wrong thing, but I do need to raise support. And how do I get there and not be insensitive? And Jenn, I think you probably coach as many, if not more, people on a regular basis than anyone I know
Hmm.
that actively actually actively coaches people in raising support. So I think you're the perfect person to bring on just to have this discussion about what do you say? What do you say when you make that
Right.
phone call? So let's just camp there first of all.
Hmm.
You already mentioned some numbers, but tell me again real quickly because I know that your numbers can fluctuate and change. How
Hmm.
many people, one way or another, right now are you weekly engaging with that are raising their support? People who that you're coaching and doing their MPD.
Yeah, well, I won't say it's weekly just because we do bi-weekly just because of my bandwidth and
Okay.
capacity.
Okay.
So I don't want you to hear the number and, misjudge how much I do, but
Right.
I touch base with 72 people on a regular basis.
Okay.
Whether they're in training right now or getting that active coaching, I'm
Right.
actively coaching around 50. So
Yeah.
training around 20, coaching around 50.
Okay.
And so yeah, that's the workload. That's where I'm at. So yes, I've got the nice thing about this is I'm not just gleaning my own experience from, my own support raising and all of that, but also gleaning experience from listening and talking and asking a lot of questions and actively listening to so many different missionaries that are in the boat right now
Right.
trying
Right.
to navigate the choppy waters. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Perfect. Well, you're the person we want to talk to then. So
Yeah.
with that in mind, let's put aside that, let's assume that our listeners they've listened to the podcast that I did with Scott Morton or
Mhm.
some of the other ones we've done just recently here, and they get to that point where they make that phone call. How do they move forward? What do they say? I'm just gonna kind of turn it over to you for a couple of minutes and let you chew on that.
Yeah. Well, I think before I even say that, I do think it's really important that to note, and Scott probably already said this, but it's not time to pause completely or indefinitely, because I do think it's real. A lot of, missionaries and ministers out there are kind of going, is there a way forward at all? Did God still call me? And maybe they're doubting that. But I don't think that, anybody's call to ministry has changed just because they're a pandemic. God's outside of time. He knows all of that. And people need ministers of the gospel now more than ever, whatever that looks like for you. And I think that putting that in front of people and the realization that, oh my goodness, God really does, not that he needs us, of course, we know that, Aaron, but he wants us to be actively involved. He wants us to be a part of the story. And I think that realizing that can be fuel that is huge. So, going back to what the scriptures say, going back to vision statements, going back to those things are really important right now, as we think through, how does this look and how do we approach people. And
Yeah.
I think that it's the time to be sensitive and loving when thinking through asks. And obviously, I think it's not business as usual. So I think the first thing is whenever you're thinking through who to contact, who not to contact, you use a mix of prayer, discernment, and common sense when thinking who to reach out to right now. Do your homework on individuals, I think, is important too, and think critically. Are they a small business owner? Now may not be the best time if your area just took a shelter in place situation or theirs did. It may be that you table that reaching out to a small business owner for now, just to stay sensitive for the time being. Um,
Right, and let me just dig in on that really quickly.
yeah, go for
I
it.
actually watched two different shelter in places. I had one happen to me when I was in Southeast Asia,
Uh-huh.
and we're not quite there in Northwest Arkansas. Man, I don't think we're even days away. I haven't. I mean, we're
Mhm.
supposed to be, but we're not. It's one of those things people are out, but they're not. The governor has definitely said something, but put it this way, it could be a lot more strict than it is right now. I know it could be. I'm kind of waiting for it to happen, but I will say this: when people are getting that order. Of course, by the time people hear this podcast, everybody might have already been through this, but
Sure.
there is additionally some initial stuff as far as, oh, I've got to get groceries. I got to get more groceries. Okay, I don't want to hoard groceries, but I do need enough for this. And for some of us, it's medicine too. I'm
Mhm.
very concerned about making sure my wife has the right meds and That's even something we ran into right now. I won't get into all that. We're okay. Let's leave it at that. We're okay. Praise the Lord. But the grander point I wanted to make right there, Jen, was when somebody first gets that shelter in place, or there's a big change and all of a sudden their world is rocked.
Right.
That's never going to be the moment. Like, you might need to, yeah, give that a week or two. That doesn't mean you give up on that person, but you can be sensitive to probably
Absolutely.
not the day to call that person.
Yep. If there's a big news decision, like with a public school closing for a day or so, or whatever it is, or say we get here in Springfield, we don't have the order that Springfield Public Schools is going to be closed until, the summer, but that's probably what's going to happen. But the day that I get that news, I don't need a phone call about something else, if that makes sense. Even if I was
Totally.
anticipating that's a really good point, Aaron, because we're all sort of kind of taking this in waves. And so a day of a big announcement may not be the best day to make a phone call. If you don't have a shelter in place order and there's a small business, that may not be a day to reach out to a small business owner. So
Right.
yeah, and it doesn't mean that it's just a sensitivity issue. It's about staying sensitive to the Holy Spirit, about staying sensitive to, in your prayer life, and common sense, those kind of things. And then also thinking through, are they somebody that you would have reached out to for a distance video call anyway? Those might be really good people to reach out to at this time. And especially if they are a ministry minded person, even if, say, there's somebody that's on your C list and you haven't talked to them in a long time, but that they have, a similar call to ministry or a call to missions or a call to, they are a ministry minded person. Now may be a good time to contact them because they are feeling the weight of it just like you are, to get to that field of ministry. You know what I'm saying, Aaron?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, good. We're on the same page. So, and then, when you do ask for a social distance video appointment with an individual, here's some specific thoughts that I have on how to proceed. I think you always start baseline with the question, hey, how are you doing, Aaron, in the wake of the coronavirus? How can I specifically be praying for you and your family?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then as they respond to that question, you let the conversation go where it's going to go. You don't say, okay, cool, he answered, hey, we're doing okay. And then you move on to your question. No, you dig deep into that question and you take the time to answer, like for them to answer. You use follow-up questions. Use attuned listening ears. You ask, like I said, additional questions, all of those kind of things. And then here's my splice, okay? So there's an option or a path A and a path B to all of
Okay.
this.
Okay,
So
now
if
wait a minute. Real
Go ahead.
quickly here, Jen.
Uh-huh.
I love what you said there as far as, yeah, you're listening. And so it might feel, to use like a cooking term,
Right.
you might ask a few questions and let it simmer.
Yep.
Like, don't assume that water's all warmed up and boiling yet. And and Jen, actually, you did two or three different questions there. The listener, you could do two or three different questions. You could just do, how are you? Then you could give it a minute, and then you could go, how's the virus affecting you? And you could give it a minute. But Jen, I really like what you had to say there, because the idea is you're not rushing to the splice that you haven't even told us
Mm-hmm.
about yet. You're not trying to get to that splice as quickly as possible. You're giving it a minute or two or three or five to even determine how to move forward, right?
Yep. And pro tip here, Aaron, I really think that now is the time. We don't get a ton of training in our lives on the art of listening, but it is something that I am terribly fascinated in, just as a personally. But I do think that if you haven't brushed up on your listening skills, now's the time to do it. If you've got extra time, there are some really great resources on listening that you can just Google, or just, quick thoughts on listening. Those type of things are really helpful right now, because people need to be heard right now, and people need a minister just like yourself, listener, to be there for them, and you can be that. Okay, so back to the splice. Okay, so you've got option A and option B based off of their response, and you take the time to feel it out with sensitivity in mind. So, Aaron, so let's say you and I are talking, and option A is you say, "Hey, Jen, we're doing fine. We're social distancing. We're sort of self quarantined, but we're good. We're good. We haven't lost our jobs. We're working from home. It's a challenge, but we're okay." Okay. So
Right.
that's path or option A. So Aaron
Okay.
says that to me. And my response to that would be, Aaron, that is awesome. I know it's been a challenge for you and others. And if there are any prayer needs that come up, Aaron, let me know. Um,
Mm,
I am calling because I feel my call. We've recently spoken, or you probably have seen somewhere along the lines, as we've spoken at church or whatever, that, my husband and I are going overseas in ministry, and we feel that call now more than ever to be ministers of the gospel. And Aaron, we're raising up our team of financial and prayer support partners, and you absolutely came to mind as somebody that we would like to be a part of that. Now, staying sensitive to the day and the time that we're living in right now, in the midst of the coronavirus, I was wondering, Aaron, if we could schedule a video call. I've got a Zoom account, and can easily give you a link sometime this week with you and your wife to see if you guys would like to link arms with us in some aspect of that ministry vision, and goals, and tell you a little bit more about that. Could we get an appointment sometime next week? And then you answer, and I proceed from there.
and
Now,
of course, everybody will say, "Yes, absolutely." No. But
and
some might.
but
Some
I'm
might.
giving a little wiggle room, as you noticed, in that, to tell you now, keeping in mind that everything's a little bonkers right now. I'm acknowledging that, and I want to stay sensitive. So if you say, you know what, now's not a good time, then
Right.
I'm gonna table it, and I'm gonna say, hey, Aaron, can I follow up with you sometime in the next couple of weeks? But
Right.
you noticed there that I was sort of giving it nuance. I was giving it a little room. I wasn't forcing the issue, but I was trying to stay
Yeah.
a little sensitive in the midst of that.
Another pro tip in there too that I noticed you did, Jen, probably without even thinking about it, because that's just how you roll. But you you had a great I'll call it a script. You had a great flow to what
Hmm.
you were saying there. And what you didn't do is you didn't ask a lot of questions.
Right.
You set it up well. You explained what you're doing, why you're doing it. Really, there was just one question: could we find a time to meet to Zoom? And that was it. Like that. That
Hmm.
was the one question instead of. So would your wife get on the computer with you?
Right.
So is next Thursday good? Do you know Zoom? Do you know Google? Do you know FaceTime? Do you know, like, instead of jumping in with a thousand questions and barraging the person, you set it up well, and the question is, could we try and find a time to meet?
Right.
And you could even go a little next level with that. And you could get more specific and say, could we try and find a time to meet perhaps, online next Thursday, like early afternoon? Like you could even like draw that down. But I think there's a lot of good stuff you said there, Jim, but I love that there's a bit of an explanation, but with
Yep.
only one clear question. And that's definitely kind of a next level pro tip when it comes to people that are making phone calls for setting up appointments.
Yeah, and like I said earlier, I think it's important that you mention that your call still has meaning, and you put that in front of them, instead of our natural inclination is to be apologetic about that for whatever reason. But people still need Jesus. People still need ministers. So I think that really putting that in front of people is important as well, and sort of, important that you kind of acknowledge that in this time. So yeah.
Very good. Very good. All right. So that was option A, where
Yes.
what
So
happened is somebody was warm to it,
right.
and they didn't say, "Yeah, I just lost my job and I don't know where we're going to find groceries next week." That was the opposite. Things were going really well with them, and so you went in for trying to set up an appointment. So I'm assuming that the option B is a little different.
Yeah, option B is they say we're really struggling. So if you say to me, Jen, we are struggling financially, emotionally. This is a really challenging time for us. whatever the situation is, if you're feeling that out and it seems like that they're in a very challenging time, you
Yeah.
immediately go into ministry mode. Okay, you're
Yeah.
thinking, I'm not going to get into an ask here, like for an appointment. But here's what I'm going to say to you, Aaron. So I'm going to say, if you say I'm doing terrible,
Hmm.
I'm going to say, Aaron, we are going to absolutely be praying for you as you're challenged with your finances, your job, and just the overall emotional health of your kids and what we were just talking about. And we really want to, like, let's even take time in the end of this phone call and actually pray together, Aaron. But I wanted you to know the reason why we're calling is we are feeling our call to ministry now more than ever. And we realize that now is not a good time to get into that. But we did want to talk to you a little bit more about joining some aspect of our team, whether that's just in prayer or finances or whatever. But we're going to just hit the pause button on that because obviously there's so much going on right now. And so we might touch base with you sometime in the next couple of months about that. But for now, let's grab a few minutes and just pray about that. And if it's okay, I want to follow up with you on a text or a phone call sometime in the next couple of weeks and just really see how things are going. And
Hmm.
and then I'm gonna go from there. So
And
that's
you're going to pray with them. You're
I'm
going to
gonna
encourage
pray with
them.
them.
You're not going to keep bringing up money. And,
Yep,
we need money too. Now, but you can say, we're moving into ministry. Please, please be praying for us.
yep.
This is a weird time. So you
And
basically go ahead.
yeah, and script here is important. I think it's really this is a pro tip too, Aaron, is I think that it's really important to write these things down. So, and you may even actually
I agree.
look at it and use it on your first couple of phone calls before you get your language down. But pro
Yeah.
tip is to actually write these responses out for option A and option B. But
Yeah.
obviously, Aaron, with option B, it's going to be nuanced. It's not going to feel fake. That might have felt a little like fake because it's just a script. But I'm going to take the things that you actually mentioned, how, because I'm going to use my attuned listening ears for how you're struggling. I'm going to ask questions and I'm going to take those and I'm going to insert that into that script. And not just going to do it willy nilly, but I'm really doubling down on your thoughts and emotions. And I'm not really inserting myself into the story. I'm
Mm.
just going to be talking about that. And I may mention that this is why I was calling originally, but let's scrap that, Aaron, and let's talk about what's going on with you because that's way important to me right now. So
Right.
I may mention that. And guess what, Aaron? If you're doing really bad, I might not even mention it. I might not even just do anything but just talk to you about, like, if it's a woman on woman, like a woman to a woman situation, and the other one's crying, I'm not maybe even going to mention what's happening and why I'm calling. I
Right.
might do that at another time. So I'm going to stay super sensitive. I'm going to pray before these phone calls, all of those things. So, Aaron, that's a little bit about the option A and option B
Hmm.
situation. Yeah. So that's kind of what I'm thinking.
Very good. Now, I will say this though.
Hmm.
So let's say option B happens and you're rolling with it and you're just loving on that person and encouraging them and you're saying, "Hey, please be praying for my ministry. I'd love to talk with you someday." Maybe you don't say this about financial partnership or like, "Hey, I want to check on you again
Yeah. Right.
in a couple months." Like, so that's where being spiritually healthy is really important. Sometimes it might be completely appropriate for you to kind of remind them that you need to talk with them about the finances later on. Other times you might go, "Okay, you know what, I'm just not even going to bring it up right now." And
Yep.
so one of the things that I think is super important, in fact, one of the more common issues I see with people that are raising support though is they have that sort of conversation, that option B conversation, and then they don't track it. Like they don't keep a
Yes.
note of what happened. And so, we talk about in the SRS boot camps, and Jen, I know that you encourage people that you coach to be really really on top of things with their administration as well. But listeners, seriously, if you're not using an MPD software like Karani, like Donor Elf, like MPDX, like TNT, like if you're not using something, use use one of those softwares. It helps you stay organized. And this is one of those moments where you talk with someone and it's just the wrong time. it's the wrong time. If you're like me, I think, oh, I'm going to remember to talk to them 2 or 3 months from now. I'm going to remember to follow up with them. That's what I think in my head. And I just lie to myself because I do. I
Hmm.
forget. I forget. And so in that moment, after that phone call, after that genuine conversation, and hopefully you've prayed with them, don't go on to your next phone call. Open up,
Hmm.
MPDX or whatever it is you're using. Open it up and have a file on that person and that you've created a contact, and make a note. Hey, I talked with Jimmy on the 5th of the month, and he's hurting, and it looks like his job may or may not be moving forward. And take a note, and then maybe even set yourself a task for making sure you pray for Jimmy again a few days from now, but also set yourself a task for maybe a few months from now, or whatever the timeline it is, of following up, and maybe see if you can't get that actual support raising appointment down the road a little bit. Jen, I took a little longer explaining that than what I meant to,
No, I
but
think it's so important. Yeah.
yeah, people forget that, or they get disorganized after their phone call and they run on to the next one. And I'm like, wait a minute,
Hmm.
take, or 3 minutes or 5 minutes, take the time to record what happened, both for your prayer list, but also for your future follow up for the people that were more of the option B, right?
Right, right. Yep. However it is that you do that, do it, get it. And I think it's important too, like if you're doing this as a unit or as a married couple, to sort of stay on the same page with conversations and both have access to that. So, if
Yes.
it's a couple friend, like maybe the wife also reaches out to, if it's the wives had a conversation, maybe the husband also reaches out to the husband. It's just, there's so many things to keep in mind with that. But yeah, I think it's
Yeah,
always
that's a
a
good
kind
point.
of, yeah, yeah,
That's a
regular
really good point,
conversation.
because Marky and I would like to pray for our partner team, and sometimes I'll have these significant conversations, and without meaning to, I forget to tell her.
Right.
Uh, and so there's a couple times in the last month where, yeah, I just had to go, hey, just so you know, so and so, this is going on with them when you're praying for them because this or that. And she was like, oh, I'm glad you said something. And I'm like, yeah,
Right.
I'm sorry. Sorry. So all of us can get a little disorganized, but yeah, if you're a couple that's in
Hmm.
full-time ministry, and you have one of these significant conversations, make sure that you share it with your spouse, so that they know how to pray
Right.
with you. If nothing else, they're informed with you as well. So that's a good point, Jen.
Yeah, yeah. And that leads me to another point. Now is a really good time for your supporters and just people in your life in general to hear from you without asking anything of them at all. So,
Absolutely.
that probably should be like, as not probably should, but that's one of the main things that I've really been coaching is, hey, are you staying ministry minded? And this may be already in some of your podcasts, but I think one of the things that you should be doing is just reaching out to your existing partners or just friends and family in general, and just seek to be an encouragement. Ministry doesn't start whenever you get active into your assignment, it starts now. You
Amen.
are a vital minister of the gospel. You have already been this is a part of it. And so stay in relationship with people, stay ministry minded. If somebody comes to mind, text them. All of those things apply, and now's a really good time for churches, pastors, to hear from you without you asking for anything,
Yep.
just because you want to be involved and you want to be there for them. So
Yep. Yep. And this is ministry. I like how you put that too. That starts now. This
yeah.
is ministry. This process of calling people, even people that you're hoping are going to join your team, and some of them won't be able to, that doesn't mean you're not doing ministry right now.
Right.
And in fact, Jen, I don't know about you, but I almost feel more like I'm doing ministry with support raising when I do contact a supporter and I don't have any sort of financial,
Hmm.
like anything. Like I'm just calling to say, hey, how you doing? I'm praying for you. What's going on? Like that is my time when it's refreshing. Like I
Hmm.
love doing that. Even though I love it when people join my team financially. So I definitely encourage the listeners, if you're struggling with that shift in your head and heart, spend some time with the Lord on that. Be praying about that. If you've been through a boot camp, go back and look through the scriptures and things like that. Some of the trainings, even if you got training from somewhere outside of a boot camp, make sure you review the information that you've had to this point regarding support raising when it comes to the spiritual side, because by far, and I know Jenn, you believe this way too, the most important thing in all of this is that you remain spiritually healthy, and that your relationship with Jesus is number one. That is so much more important than the finances that you need, even though you do need finances.
Yeah.
So, well, Jenn, you gave a lot of great specific nuance there. Any other thoughts for people that are making that phone call to try and set up an appointment in the time of the coronavirus crisis?
Yeah, I think, I think it's just important if you do have a coach to keep them updated, obviously, on the process that you're having, and ask a lot of questions.
Hmm.
Ask a lot of questions of other people who are also like people in your organization that are also raising support. Maybe
Hmm.
even like get together some Zoom calls with other people that are in the same boat, ask how things are going, pray with each other. I think all of those things in kind of building community, so you're not feeling like, oh, man, I'm doing this all by myself.
Mm.
Especially if you don't have a coach, is really helpful and important. So get creative, and if you want somebody to be reaching out to you, reach out to somebody else. And meaning, if I want somebody from my organization to be reaching out to me right now because I don't know what I'm doing or how to make this work, why don't you reach out to somebody else that may need the same thing and build community? Be the person that's building community around this. And I think we're going to see some awesome moments. But if you do have a coach, ask for help with complicated correspondence or whatever it is. So
Right.
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Great. All right, Jenn. Well, we need to wrap up the podcast, but before we do, I want to apologize. I mentioned your website on a different podcast, and I'm pretty sure I gave the address wrong. So sorry about that. It is JENNFORTNER, JennFortner.com. Two N's in Jenn, JennFortner.com. And Jenn, I've always been impressed. I don't know how long you've been running that website, but you always have like great articles and visuals and stuff like that. So that's, if someone wanted to connect more with some of your information, I'm assuming that's a good place to go.
Yes, it is just on JennFortner.com, and if you click on it, there's an about contact tab, and you can reach out to me there. It's got my email address and some other ways that you can contact me and some other things to know about me. And if you are looking for coaching, if you're looking for, like questions, you've got questions. I've maybe got some answers, who knows? But yeah, just reach out to me there, and we'll get a conversation going. If you are looking for coaching, there might be some places that I can point you towards. So yeah,
Okay,
get in
great.
touch.
Great. Well, Jenn, I know that you are like everybody else, pretty much right now. You're mostly homebound, shelter in place, but I'm thankful that you're able to find some time in the schedule, and so please thank Zach and Sloan and Merrick. Sloan and
Yeah,
Merrick for sharing their mommy, and Zach for sharing the wife here. You and I are
yeah,
recording this early morning, but I really appreciate you taking the time and blessing our listeners with the SRS podcast. So thanks again for being on today.
yeah, no problem. So blessed. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for this episode. We would love to hear your ideas for future content. Please visit supportraisingsolutions.org/feedback to share your thoughts and questions. Also, wherever you download your podcast from, be sure to subscribe for future episodes and come back each week to gain more insight into the process of building and maintaining your personal support team.